We've been covering the spiritual heroes, some of the spiritual heroes of the Old Testament. We'll talk about Moses today. But start off with a little bit different direction. You know, over the holidays, sometimes I get to go to the gym at a different time in the afternoon than I typically do. And of course, I haven't been able to do a whole lot with my neck, but do the treadmill at least. But when you go a little bit earlier, sometimes in the gym they have on the soap operas. Which, you know, of course I don't watch them on a regular basis, but you see them up there on the screen. And what strikes me when you're looking at that is all the people are good looking. I mean, they're really good looking. I mean, the husband's good looking, the wife's good looking, the neighbor's good looking, the ex-husband's good looking, the dog's good looking. Everybody on the show is good looking. It's just really strange. It's as if the world's been transformed. And there's only perfect people out in this little kind of bubble here. And it's really strange. But I guess it shouldn't surprise me because, you know, oftentimes we're bombarded with these images all the time around us in magazines, on billboards, in movies and shows, that there's a sense in which, in order to count, you have to be perfect, you know, in form and in look. And whether they're advertising, you know, perfume or underwear or even hamburgers, the people that are on the screen, they're good looking. And you're like, okay, what's up with that? But we have this sense in which, you know, we really focus on those kinds of things in our culture. And so there's these concerns with body image. And so Glamour Magazine did this study in 2014. It was actually a follow-up to a 1984 study they'd done. And they found that 54% of women, that's 13% more than in 84, 54% of women are unhappy with their body. And that 80% say that just looking in the mirror is a painful experience. You're like, what's up with that? And so media portrayals are where it's normal for women to get thinner and thinner and for men to get more muscular and ripped. And so they keep portraying for us what are actually not normal people on the screen. And so you get this kind of false image. And so concerns over body image, of course, have resulted in a multi-billion-dollar diet industry because everybody's trying to live up to that image because they want to look like that. And so, and one statistic I found was that about half of female teens think they're too fat, and the 50% are dieting because there's so much pressure to fit in, and they think, you know, I have to have the perfect body. And so Americans spend $40 billion a year on these kinds of programs, books and products and all kinds of, you know, the Atkinson diet and the Ornish diet and the Weight Watchers diet and the Jenny Craig diet and all that kind of stuff. And then you have the exercise industry. They're cashing in too, right? So you have all this money. People buy the equipment, the books and the tapes in hopes that they're gonna shape up and they're gonna look like the person that's portrayed on the commercial who's using that equipment. Now, what they don't tell you, I guess, is that you actually have to use the equipment for it to work. You know, it doesn't really work if it's in your closet or it's under your bed. You have to actually get on the thing and do what it says. But, you know, of course, if you can't get the perfect body through exercise or through diet, there's always cosmetic surgery. $12.9 billion spent in cosmetic surgery for people trying to get that look. And if none of that works, of course, the fashion industry will just sell you a new set of clothes, and that'll make you look right. So when you start thinking about this, why are people spending so much time, effort, heartache, money trying to do all this stuff? And I think there's a number of reasons, a number of tributaries. Some of that is to bolster your self-esteem, you know. It's to try and impress others, to try and fit in. For some, I think, especially the younger, it's this belief that, you know, if I'm that person on the page or the screen that I'm looking at, if I'm like that person, I'll be accepted. I'll be popular. I'll fit in. And the people will like me. Maybe they'll even love me. That'll be great. And if I have the perfect body and I wear all the right clothes and I speak all the right words, then at least no one can criticize me. And no one can make fun of me. And no one can reject me. And that's really what it's all about. We don't want to be rejected. In fact, I found this quote on a dating site. It said this. Not that I was trying to date, but I was looking for this. It says, quote, "Don't be fooled by yourself or kind-hearted friends. Looks matter. in the dating game, and never more so than in this media-savvy world we live in. It may be unfair, we may hate it, but it's true. Image is king and speaks volumes about who we are. From the clothes we wear to the places we eat and drink to the places we decide to inhabit, people notice what we do and make judgments as to who we are and by how we look. And you might want to jump all over that and criticize this guy and say, that's just a horrible thing. But aren't they speaking the truth? It might not be how we want it to be. It might not be the right thing. It might not be how it should be. But isn't that how it is? That we do tend to judge people by those kind of superficial, outward, easily seen kinds of things. And then we get all kinds of impressions about them from that. And we gravitate to those people who look good. And we gravitate to those people who are high energy and exciting and funny and they're just nice to be around. If you think about relationships in general, you want to be around people that make you laugh, that tell good stories, that look good, and when you're by them, it makes you look good, that you feel good about yourself. And you don't tend to spend a whole lot of time around people that repulse you, or irritate you, or annoy you, unless you have to, by some reason. We love the lovable, right? No one likes people who are difficult. People who, everybody's had at least one of those person in their life, that sometimes some of us are blessed with multiple folks, right, who just sap you emotionally. And when the phone rings and it's their number, it's like, oh, not them again, right? Because it's just going to be a drain. It's just hard. Some people are just easier to love than others. That's the reality. And loving the unlovable is a challenge. And so what I want us to do today is, as we look through the story of Moses, to find the transformation that takes place in his life, where he comes into the picture and is able to find a way to love the unruly and unlovable Israelites. And so we're going to do a kind of a quick survey of his life story, just to kind of remind ourselves of some of this and just to see that. So the first scene that we want to talk about is the call of Moses. So if you have a Bible, you can look at Exodus 3. I think we're going to have it up here on the screen. So imagine this. This is kind of a strange story, scene. That you have this great and awesome God who's going to call you to become their representative. Now you got to hear this with the James Earl Jones voice. I can't do it, but I'll read it anyway. So he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt, and I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of the land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the country of the Canaanites, the Hittites, and the Amorites, the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. The cry of the Israelites has come to me. I have also seen how the Egyptians oppressed them. So come, I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. That's great. God has come and they called Moses. But notice his responses. There's a series of them throughout the rest of the chapter and on into chapter 4. I'm just going to highlight them. We're not going to read all of this. But look at verse 11. Well, who am I that I should bring them out? I'm not good enough for that. Second response. Well, if they ask me, well, what's the name of this God? What should I say? I don't even know who you are. Chapter 4, verse 1. What if they don't believe me? Well, they don't listen to me. And they say, well, the Lord didn't appear to you. Chapter 4, verse 10. Well, Lord, I've never been eloquent. I'm slow of speech and tongue. He's just coming up with excuse after excuse after excuse. And the best one, of course, verse 13. Lord, just please send someone else to do it. Here's God calling you to a mission, and he's like, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to have anything to do with this plan. This is a thanks but no thanks response, right, to God. Yet God is insistent. He's not going to let it go. And you almost wonder as you read through this account, has God really picked the right guy for the job? He doesn't want to do this. He doesn't want nothing to do with it at all. But after his reluctance, it doesn't seem so bad at first. The story kind of, as it progresses, it starts working out okay. So in chapter 4:31, Moses meets with the Israelites, And he does the signs that God had given him to do. So first comes the whole staff becomes snake trick. That goes over pretty well. And then he has the arm which turns to the leprous arm stunt. That is impressive as well. And the people believe. And they worship God. And Moses is thinking, well, maybe this won't be so bad. This is kind of nice. Got the whole staff thing, snake and everything. I don't even have to feed it, right? Because, pick it off the ground, comes the staff again. I don't have to feed that snake. Yet Moses' first visit to Pharaoh, of course, doesn't go so well. He comes in with the bold confidence, I'm the servant of God. And he says, let my people go. Well, that just falls on deaf ears. Because Pharaoh is not impressed. He's got magicians who can do signs like that. And so instead of complying, he just increases the labor of the Israelites. Which then doesn't go over so well for Moses, because the Jewish foremen are beaten when they don't meet their quota, and they come to Moses and they chew him out. I said, what are you doing? I thought you were here to help. And so Moses, likewise, complains to God. He says, what are you up to, God? I thought this was a rescue mission, and look how it's all turned out. This is not helping the people. But God says to Moses, I got a plan. I'm working a plan. I haven't forgotten the promises that I spoke to the patriarchs. I'm going to take this people out of this land. And I'm going to bring them back to the promised land. And I'm going to make it right. And so Moses goes back to the Israelites and he shares what God had shared with him. But they don't believe him. They're not very happy. In fact, this is a very different reaction from how they responded at first. But after all, think about it from the Israelites' perspective. We've got to cut them some slack. It's been 430 years that they've been in Egypt. And God, seemingly, from what we tell from Scripture, hasn't done anything. There's no stories, right? So they don't know this God very well, if at all. And so, if you know the rest of the story, of course, you know that the 10 plagues happen, right? And so if you've ever seen the Charlton Heston movie with the 10 Commandments, you know how it all works out, right? There's the big seas, plagues, and all that kind of stuff. But we're out in the desert now. Well, all that's happened. We're out in the wilderness. And the army of Pharaoh is now chasing them. That's not a great thing. And look at chapter 14, verse 11. The Israelites begin their complaints. Is it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? Now you would think that they'd appreciate the freedom that he's just gotten for them, right? But they're already having second thoughts. They're wondering what's going on here. So a little later, after they've been rescued from Pharaoh's army, they enter into the wilderness of Sin, which is probably appropriately named. And the people look around and they find nothing to eat. And so they say to Moses, chapter 16, verse 3, would that we had died by the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat, when we ate bread to the full, for you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. It's like, really? Really? Is that what you got? And a short time later, they camped at Rephidim, where there was no water. And this, by the way, is after God had provided for them already, right? So they camped at Rephidim. Chapter 17, verse 3. Why now have you brought us up from Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst? I mean, the story just keeps repeating itself. Moses is constantly being bombarded by their complaints. I mean, here's a people who've experienced God's signs and wonders and rescue firsthand on numerous occasions. I mean, they've seen all the things that he's done, but all they see are the roadblocks in front of them. And at every turn that they're faced by a challenge, they complain to Moses. They're a completely and thoroughly ungrateful and faithless people. They act like a bunch of whiny babies. And who likes whiners? Anybody? Anybody? No. Not really. Nobody likes whiners. So I don't know about you, but I would have already been ready to say, Egypt's that way. If y'all want to go, it was so good for you, just try and make your way back. It's that direction. I'm just staying here. Well, why not? It's easy to help people we love when they're in trouble, right? That's the message here. But when you have people that are kind of irritating and annoying. It's a little bit more difficult. I mean, I don't mind helping people who cause me a great deal of inconvenience if I think they're going to appreciate it. If they're going to, be thankful for it. But if they start whining and complaining while I'm helping them, really? You're going to do that? Well, you can be on your own then. Right? You want to expect a little bit of a word of appreciation at least. But the ones who take you for granted, those are just really difficult people to serve. And so the key text we want to get to here, of course, is in chapter 32 and the whole scene with the golden calf. So turn to 32. So the next scene becomes, in some sense, inexplicable as we look at what happened. So, excuse me, at the beginning of this chapter, they're up to their old tricks again. Early in the story, by the way, we had this scene at Mount Sinai where they made a covenant with Yahweh. They had agreed to serve Him and to obey all His commands. And so Moses returns from the mountain for further instruction. And then in 32 verse 1, here's what it says. Moses has left. When the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, the people gathered around Aaron and said to him, "Come make gods for us who will go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we don't know what happened to him." Now, most likely, what's going on here in this whole scene, as they begin to ask for these gods to be made, these idols to be made, it's not depicting the Israelites abandoning Yahweh. I don't think that's what they're doing. I think they're trying to simply worship Him in a familiar way, because everybody around them, everybody they've ever lived with, they use idols to worship their gods. And so remember, this is a new relationship with this God, and so they're just simply trying to say, let's do it the way we've always done it, and that's using idols. But Aaron utters no word of protest. He knows better. Instead, he becomes an accomplice to their sin. And he proclaims a feast day, and they start this revelry. Meanwhile, on the mountain, God is aware of their activities. And notice the language here in verse 7. God tells Moses, "Go down, because your people, whom you brought up out of Egypt, have become corrupt." Now, I'll just hint at this, but I think that in this whole chapter, when we see God's portrayal in this chapter, that God is really testing Moses in some ways to see if he truly will become an intercessor here. But watch what happens next. So, verse 10. "Now let me alone, so that my wrath may burn hot against them, and I may consume them. And of you I will make a great nation." Now, if I were Moses, I'd be like, "Yes, that's a great idea. Let's get rid of these folks, because they've only been irritating to me, and let's start over with somebody new." That makes sense to me. A fresh group. Somebody that's more easily dealt with than these guys. But Moses, in this very moment, begins to become a true mediator. Look at verse 11. "Oh Lord, why does your wrath burn hot against your people, whom you brought up out of the land of Egypt with your power and your mighty hand?" And then he goes through several arguments. If you kill them, the Egyptians are going to say, "Well, you meant that all along. You just brought them out in the wilderness to do evil. Remember your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You made promises." And so the Lord relents. Again, I think, of course, God had a plan all along. He knew what he was doing. But he's getting Moses into this role of mediator. But Moses, of course, he isn't so calm himself when he actually gets down there and sees the whole scene. He confronts the Israelites, and he gets angry, and he breaks the tablets, and he grinds them up and makes them drink the water with it, with the idols in it. And the breaking of the tablets just confirms that this covenant has already been broken, as new as it is. And then Moses confronts Aaron. He says, What were you doing? What were you thinking? You led these people into such a great sin. And then, Aaron's response is classic. Look at this. This is chapter 32, verse 25. "Well, you know how prone these people are to evil. They gave me the gold. I threw it into the fire, and out popped this calf." As if he didn't have anything to do with it. They just handed me it. If you read earlier, Aaron asked him to give him his gold, right? He knew exactly what he was doing, but he's going into denial mode here. But where I want us to focus is at the end of the chapter. Look at verse 30 and 32. On the next day, Moses said to the people, "You have sinned a great sin, but now I will go up to the Lord. Perhaps I can make atonement for your sin." So Moses returned to the Lord and said, "Alas, this people has sinned a great sin. They have made for themselves gods of gold. But now, if you will only forgive their sin, but if not, blot me out of the book that you have written." Now, can you believe this? Here's Moses trying to make atonement for this people. The people that have complained and caused him trouble all along the way. And he says, "Forgive them or blot me out of the book that you've written." Now, what exactly does that refer to is somewhat of a mystery because, later on, of course, we talk about the book of life and the eternal consequences and all of that. But at this stage in Israel's history, there really wasn't a concept of the afterlife like we have it. So more than likely, the book that he's referring to, at least in his own thinking, would be the book of the covenant, the book of God's people that marks down those who are God's. And he's saying, I'm willing to give up my own place among the covenant people for the sake of these folks. These ungrateful, stubborn, complaining Israelites. Now what has happened since that burning bush scene where he said, "Just send someone else"? How did this happen? That Moses has come to this point where he understands love in such a way that he's willing to sacrifice of himself for an ungrateful, unruly, unworthy people. What's changed? He's been with God. And Moses has learned to see beyond this people's imperfection. That he has learned to come and see them with the eyes of God. To recognize what they need, not what they deserve. To love them in spite of who they are and how they behave. To love them even when they're unlovable. As I said earlier, our natural response is to love people who please us, who look good, who act well. Those are the lovable folks. And that's true, of course, when it comes to physical appearance. But when we come to God, it's I think also true of us, right? That God chooses to love us even when we're unlovable. And that's the message, the first message I want us to hear, that we need, I think, repeatedly to hear that God loves us, even when we don't feel worthy. Even when we're in those points of lowness and darkness and the deep well, and we feel like we don't deserve God's love. Well, that's true. But He loves you anyway. That's the message. And so just like some Americans, they strive for that perfect body to make others like them, sometimes we strive to be religiously perfect. We try and live out a righteous life so that God will love us. Guess what? That doesn't work. But He loves you anyway. He loves us even in the face of our imperfection. He loves us in the absence of perfection. He loves us in spite of, not because of. But more importantly here, what I want us to hear is when we look at the life of Moses, that this becomes that kind of glaring lesson for me because Moses got that. He recognized that. He recognizes what it means to love in the absence of perfection. I mean, if anyone has good reason to give up on a people, it's Moses. He's the one that could have, with good conscience, just turned his back on them and said, yeah, wipe them out. Start over. He would have been justified. But he's demonstrating a godly love. He loves because they need love. And as imperfect as they are, they're His people. They're His people. And it's somewhat like, as you think about it from a perspective of a parent when we're with our children, right? We love our children not because of their perfect appearance, and definitely not because of their flawless performance in any realm of life. Because, kids, they're messing up all the time. Why? Because humans mess up all the time. Because we as their parents mess up all the time. So why do we love them? Because they're our children. That's why. And so the challenge for us, I think, as we see this spiritual giant here, is to learn that principle of love. It's an active love. It's love that's not a feeling, but it's a choice. It's a love that's motivated by the needs of the recipient, of those who are on the other end, not our own needs. We love people not for what they can do for us, not because they're perfect, but because they simply need to be loved. So let me finish with just two illustrations of this from make it real practical. In terms of marriage, a number of us in here are married. You know, marriages often fall shipwreck when one or both partners are too consumed with their own needs and wanting to have those fulfilled. And oftentimes they look, if you look at worldly marriages, they often look to their partner to fulfill them. And when they first start dating, of course, that person's the ideal, oh man, they're just it. And we build them up. We don't see them for who they really are. We see them for who we want them to be. And oftentimes things get a little bit tricky when we live with them for a while. We find, oh, that's not really who you are, is it? And then we think, and here's the problem, we assume we made the wrong choice. We assume that there really is that person that we had in mind out there somewhere. That myth of the perfect soulmate still is alive and well. And you'll see it in people that go from relationship to relationship to relationship, convinced it's out there somewhere, the perfect mate. But love is a choice that we make in the absence of perfection. Of course, if there was perfection, who wouldn't love them? Well, there wouldn't be anything not to love. But strong marriages are built on relationships where you don't demand the other person to fulfill you, that you still love them, even when you see all the negatives. Remember that? I mean, it's kind of archaic and corny, but that really old vow that said, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, the good and the bad,